Babysitters, what was your scariest moment on the job? I was reading bedtime stories to 6-year-old Lily Thornton when I noticed the camera in her bedroom ceiling had a red recording light. Not the tiny security camera her parents mentioned during the interview, but a professional setup with a motorized lens that followed my movements across the room. I kept reading about the hungry caterpillar while my stomach twisted into knots, trying to figure out why anyone needed surveillance equipment that tracked a babysitter reading to a child. The Thorntons had seemed normal when they hired me 3 weeks ago. Successful lawyers, beautiful home in the suburbs, references that checked out perfectly. But now I was noticing cameras everywhere. One behind the bookshelf aimed at Lily's bed, another in the closet partially hidden by hanging clothes, a third mounted in the corner disguised as a smoke detector. I counted 5 cameras in this one bedroom and my hands started shaking so badly I had to set down the book. Lily looked up at me with those big brown eyes and asked if I was okay. I forced a smile and told her I just needed some water. In the hallway I found 3 more cameras pointed at different angles. The bathroom had 2. The playroom downstairs had at least 6 that I could identify. Every single one had that red recording light glowing in the darkness. The Thorntons wouldn't be home for another 4 hours. They'd told me they had dinner reservations downtown followed by a concert, giving me their usual spiel about how rare it was for them to get couple time. I thought it was sweet how much they trusted me with Lily. Now I was wondering what they were actually watching through all these cameras. I went back to Lily's room and finished the story, tucking her in while trying not to stare at the lenses tracking every movement. She reached up and hugged me goodnight, whispering that I was her favorite babysitter. The innocence in her voice made my chest hurt. After turning off her light, I closed the door and stood in the hallway with my heart pounding. I needed to check something. The Thorntons had given me permission to use their home office if I needed to print anything for my college classes. I'd never actually gone in there, but tonight I had a reason. The office door was locked. I tried my emergency key ring that Mrs. Thornton had provided for the house, but none of those keys fit this particular lock. Through the frosted glass panel, I could see the glow of multiple computer monitors. Someone had left equipment running. I pressed my ear against the door and heard a faint humming sound, like servers or recording equipment processing data. My phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Thornton. "How's Lily? Did she eat all her dinner?" I responded that everything was fine and Lily was asleep. The response came back immediately with a photo attachment. My blood went cold when I opened it. The image showed me standing outside the office door at that exact moment, taken from a camera I hadn't even noticed in the hallway ceiling. The text below read, "Good. Stay out of rooms you're not authorized to enter." I looked up and found the camera, a tiny dome barely visible against the white ceiling. It rotated slightly, adjusting its angle to center on my face. Someone was controlling it remotely. Someone was watching me right now. I walked back downstairs to the living room, trying to act natural even though my hands wouldn't stop shaking. I sat on the couch and pulled out my textbook, pretending to study while my mind raced through possibilities. Maybe the Thorntons were just extremely security conscious. Rich people did that sometimes, right? Cameras everywhere to protect their property and their child. But that photo they'd sent felt like a threat. Stay out of rooms you're not authorized to enter. The phrasing was wrong, too formal, too controlled. I opened my laptop and did something I probably should have done 3 weeks ago. I Googled Catherine and Michael Thornton lawyers. The first result made my stomach drop. Catherine Thornton was a defense attorney who specialized in protecting wealthy clients accused of financial crimes. Michael Thornton was a corporate lawyer who'd been mentioned in several news articles about helping companies hide assets during investigations. Nothing illegal exactly, but definitely operating in gray areas. I kept scrolling and found something worse. A blog post from 2 years ago written by their previous nanny, posted under a pseudonym but with enough details that it was clearly about the Thorntons. The nanny described feeling constantly watched, finding hidden cameras in places they shouldn't be, and discovering that the Thorntons were recording everything and storing the footage. The post ended abruptly without explaining why she'd left. I tried to find more posts from the same account, but there was nothing else. Just that one story, then silence. I checked the comments section and found 3 other people claiming they'd worked for the Thorntons too. All of them mentioned the cameras. All of them said they'd quit without notice. None of them explained why. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Mrs. Thornton. "Lily should have her medication at 9 p.m. Blue bottle in the kitchen cabinet. Exactly 5 milliliters. I looked at the time. It was 8:45. I went to the kitchen and found the blue bottle in the cabinet above the sink. The label read lorazepam, with Lily's name and dosage instructions. I recognized it as a sedative, sometimes prescribed for anxiety in children. But 5 milliliters seemed like a lot for a 6-year-old. I Googled the medication on my phone and my hands started shaking again. The normal pediatric dose was 0.5 to 1 milliliter, 5 times what Lily was being given. At this dosage, she wouldn't just be calm, she'd be unconscious for hours. I stood there holding the bottle while cameras recorded my every movement. Why would parents want their child unconscious every night? My mind went to dark places, places I didn't want to think about. I put the bottle back in the cabinet and texted Mrs. Thornton that I couldn't find it. The response came immediately. "Top cabinet above the sink. Blue bottle. Can't miss it." I responded that I'd found it and would give it to Lily at 9. Then I took a photo of the label and sent it to my best friend Amber with a message. "Does this seem like too much? For a 6-year-old? Amber was pre-med and worked part-time at a pharmacy. She'd know. While waiting for her response, I went back upstairs to check on Lily. She was sleeping peacefully, her breathing steady and normal. I stood in the doorway watching the cameras watch me. The red lights seemed to pulse in the darkness like angry eyes. My phone vibrated. Amber's response made my chest tight. "That's 5 times the normal pediatric dose. Why are you asking?" I typed back quickly. "The parents told me to give it to their kid. Is that dangerous?" 3 dots appeared showing she was typing, then disappeared, then appeared again. Finally, "That could cause respiratory depression. Like seriously dangerous. Where are you right now?" I told her I was babysitting and she responded immediately. Get that kid out of there. Call the police. That's not anxiety medication at that dose. That's chemical restraint. I read her message 3 times, my hands shaking so badly I almost dropped my phone. Chemical restraint. They were drugging their daughter into unconsciousness every single night. But why? I looked up at the cameras and suddenly understood. They wanted her unconscious so she wouldn't wake up. Wouldn't see whatever they were doing. Wouldn't remember. My phone buzzed again. Mrs. Thornton. Did you give Lily her medication yet? It's 9:03. I typed back, just about to. Then I deleted it and wrote, she was already asleep so I didn't want to wake her. Is that okay? The response was immediate. Wake her up and give her the medication. It's important for her sleep schedule. I stood there staring at that message, knowing that if I woke Lily and gave her that drug, she'd be unconscious and vulnerable for hours. And I'd be making it happen. I made a decision that would either save Lily's life or destroy mine. I went to the bathroom, poured exactly 5 milliliters of the lorazepam down the sink, then refilled the measuring cup with water. I walked to Lily's room, gently woke her, and gave her the water while cameras recorded everything. She drank it without complaint, still half asleep, and was snoring again within minutes. I texted Mrs. Thornton a photo of the empty measuring cup. All done. She went right back to sleep. The response came back. Perfect. Thank you for being so responsible. I felt sick. Responsible. That's what they called someone who drugged their child into unconsciousness. I went back downstairs and sat on the couch trying to figure out what to do next. If I called the police right now, what would I tell them? That the parents had cameras in their house? That wasn't illegal. That they'd asked me to give their child prescribed medication? Also not illegal, even if the dose was wrong. I had suspicions, but no proof of actual abuse. And if I was wrong, if there was some medical explanation I didn't understand, I'd be destroying this family and losing my job and possibly facing legal consequences for false accusations. But if I was right and I did nothing, what would happen to Lily tonight after I left? My phone rang at 9:30. Unknown number. I answered and heard a man's voice I didn't recognize. This is Agent Dennis Crawford with the FBI. Am I speaking to Sophia Bennett? My heart started racing. Yes. How did you get this number? His voice was calm but urgent. We've been monitoring the Thornton residence for 6 weeks as part of an investigation. We know you're the current babysitter. I need you to listen carefully and do exactly what I say. I looked up at the cameras, wondering if the Thorntons were listening to this call right now. Agent Crawford continued. Don't look at the cameras. Act natural. I need you to confirm something. Did the Thorntons ask you to give Lily medication tonight? I said yes, trying to keep my voice steady. Did you give her the full dose? I hesitated, then told him the truth. I gave her water instead. The dosage seemed dangerous. There was a pause on the line. Then, that probably saved her life. And it might have saved our investigation. He explained quickly that the FBI had been building a case against the Thorntons for weeks. They weren't just lawyers. They were running an operation that I didn't want to believe was real. The cameras weren't for security. They were for something much worse. The medication wasn't for Lily's anxiety. It was to keep her unconscious while her parents used their home for illegal activities that involved other people. Activities that required a sleeping child who wouldn't wake up and wouldn't remember. Agent Crawford told me that by giving Lily water instead of the sedative, I'd created a problem for their investigation. If Lily woke up during whatever the Thorntons had planned for tonight, she might see things that would traumatize her. But if I'd given her the real medication, I would have been complicit in their crimes. I'd made the right choice ethically, but now we had a situation. He asked me to stay in the house and act normal. Federal agents were already positioned around the property. They'd been waiting for the Thorntons to return home and engage in the illegal activities they'd been documenting. Tonight was supposed to be the night they made arrests. But everything had changed now that Lily would be awake. I asked what kind of illegal activities. Agent Crawford was silent for a moment before answering. The Thorntons have been hosting private parties at their home. Very exclusive, very expensive, very illegal. They use the cameras to document everything for blackmail purposes. Important people attend these parties. People who would pay substantial amounts to ensure the footage never becomes public. My stomach turned. What kind of parties? Are there children involved? Another pause. Lily is always sedated during these events. She's never been directly victimized. But the parties themselves involve activities that are serious federal crimes. We need to get you and Lily out of that house in the next 30 minutes. I felt my whole body go numb. The Thorntons were using their own home, with their daughter sleeping upstairs, to host illegal parties and then blackmail the attendees. And they'd been sedating Lily every single night to make sure she never woke up and witnessed what was happening in her own house. Agent Crawford gave me specific instructions. In exactly 10 minutes, you're going to receive a phone call from someone claiming to be Lily's grandmother. You'll pretend she's having a medical emergency and you need to take Lily to the hospital immediately. There will be a car outside with the engine running. Take Lily and get in that car. Do not stop to grab anything. Do not tell the Thorntons what you're doing. Just get Lily and go. I asked what would happen after that. He said agents would enter the house and secure the scene. The Thorntons would be arrested when they returned home. I would need to give a statement, but I wasn't in trouble. I'd actually helped them by refusing to drug the child. My phone buzzed. Mrs. Thornton. We're leaving the concert early. Be home in 20 minutes. My heart started pounding. Agent Crawford swore under his breath. They must have noticed something on the cameras. Change of plans. I need you to take Lily and leave right now. Don't wait for the call. There's an agent at the back door. Her name is Agent Parks. She'll identify herself with her badge. Trust her. I ran upstairs to Lily's room, my hands shaking as I opened her door. She was sleeping peacefully, no idea that her whole world was about to explode. I gently shook her awake. Lily, sweetie, we need to go see your grandma. She's not feeling well. Lily rubbed her eyes, confused. Grandma? In the middle of the night? I helped her into her slippers and grabbed her favorite stuffed rabbit. It's okay. I'm going to carry you. Just close your eyes. I picked her up and she wrapped her arms around my neck, already falling back asleep. As I carried her down the stairs, every camera in the house tracked our movement. I could feel them following us, recording everything. At the back door, I heard a quiet knock. Through the window, I saw a woman in casual clothes holding up an FBI badge. Agent Parks. I opened the door and she immediately took Lily from my arms. Car's running. Let's go. We ran across the dark backyard to a sedan parked in the alley. Agent Parks buckled Lily into the back seat while I climbed in beside her. Another agent was driving. We pulled away from the house just as I saw headlights turning onto the Thornton street from the opposite direction. The driver's voice was tense. They're here. 3 cars. More than expected. Agent Parks was on her radio calling for backup. I held Lily against me, her stuffed rabbit clutched in my hands. She was starting to wake up more, looking around confused. Where are we going? Where's my mommy? I didn't know what to tell her. How do you explain to a 6-year-old that her parents are criminals? That her whole life has been a lie? Agent Parks turned in her seat and spoke to Lily directly. Your mommy asked us to take you somewhere safe for a little while. Sophia is going to stay with you. Everything's okay. Lily seemed to accept this, too sleepy to question further. We drove for 15 minutes to a building downtown that looked like a regular office complex. Agent Parks led us inside to a room that had been set up like a comfortable living room. Couch, TV, toys in the corner. Lily curled up on the couch and fell back asleep immediately. I sat next to her, my whole body shaking with delayed adrenaline. Agent Parks brought me water and sat across from us. You did the right thing tonight. Most people in your situation wouldn't have questioned the medication. They would have just followed instructions. I asked what happened next. She explained that agents were entering the Thornton house right now. The Thorntons and their guests would be arrested. The evidence was overwhelming. Cameras, recordings, financial transactions, everything documented. It had taken them 6 months to build this case, and tonight was supposed to be the final operation. I asked about Lily. What would happen to a 6-year-old whose parents were going to federal prison? Agent Parks said there was an aunt in Seattle who'd already been contacted. She'd been trying to get custody of Lily for years, but the Thorntons had blocked her in court. Now with criminal charges, emergency custody would be granted. Lily would go live with her aunt within days. She'd be safe. She'd be loved. She'd get therapy to process whatever she remembered or understood about her parents. I sat there watching this little girl sleep, thinking about how close she'd come to being drugged unconscious during her parents' arrest. If I'd given her that medication, she'd be chemically sedated in a house full of federal agents in chaos. Instead, she'd slept through the whole thing in this quiet room with her favorite stuffed animal. Over the next several hours, Agent Crawford came by to take my statement. I told him everything. How I'd noticed the cameras, how the dosage seemed wrong, how I'd Googled the Thorntons and found the blog post, how I'd poured out the medication and given her water instead. He explained that my testimony would be crucial in court. The Thorntons would likely claim I was a disgruntled employee making false accusations. But the fact that I'd documented everything in texts to my friend, that I'd questioned the medication before the FBI even contacted me, that I'd acted to protect Lily without knowing there was an investigation, all of that would establish my credibility. He also told me something that made my stomach turn. The FBI had identified 14 previous babysitters who'd worked for the Thorntons over the past 6 years. All of them had quit suddenly without giving notice. Agents were interviewing them now to find out what they'd seen or suspected. Some had noticed the cameras, others had found the medication concerning. One had actually called CPS, but nothing had come of the report because the Thorntons were lawyers who knew how to manipulate the system. I was the first babysitter who'd been there during an active FBI investigation. The timing had been coincidental. They'd been watching the house for weeks, building evidence through their own surveillance of the Thorntons' activities. They'd identified me as the current babysitter and had been monitoring my safety. When I'd Googled the Thorntons that evening, their system had flagged it as potential awareness of the situation. That's why Agent Crawford had called me. Lily woke up around 2 a.m. asking for her parents. I didn't know what to tell her. Agent Park stepped in and explained gently that Mommy and Daddy had to help the police with something important. Lily would be staying with her Aunt Rachel for a while. Did she remember Aunt Rachel? Lily's face lit up. The one with the golden retriever? Baxter? Agent Parks nodded. That's right. Aunt Rachel is flying here tomorrow to pick you up. Won't that be fun? Lily seemed excited but also confused. She asked if she could bring all her toys. Agent Parks promised we'd get her toys later. For now, we were going to stay here where it was safe and warm. I spent the rest of the night playing quiet games with Lily, trying to keep her calm and distracted. We colored pictures, watched cartoons, ate microwave popcorn that one of the agents brought us. Lily seemed to sense something was wrong but couldn't articulate what. She kept asking when she could go home. I kept changing the subject. Around 5 a.m., Agent Crawford returned and asked to speak with me privately. We stepped into the hallway while another agent stayed with Lily. His face was grim. The arrests went smoothly. The Thorntons and 6 guests are in custody. We secured all the recording equipment and files. But there's something you need to know before the news breaks. He explained that the Thorntons had been running this operation for 8 years, long before Lily was born. They'd started small, hosting private parties for wealthy clients who wanted to engage in illegal activities without risk of exposure. The cameras were originally for security, to make sure clients didn't damage property or cause problems. But the Thorntons realized they could make more money through blackmail. They'd recorded everything, and then threatened to expose their clients unless they paid substantial fees for privacy insurance. The clients had no choice but to pay. Some had paid hundreds of thousands of dollars over the years to keep the footage private. And none of them could go to the police because they'd be admitting to the illegal activities captured on camera. It was a perfect blackmail scheme. Agent Crawford's expression was pained. When Lily was born, the Thorntons had to make a choice. Stop the operation or find a way to continue with the child in the house. They chose to continue. That's when they started the medication routine. Every night at 9 p.m., Lily would be sedated into unconsciousness. The parties usually started around 10 p.m. and lasted until 2 or 3 a.m. Lily would sleep through everything and wake up the next morning with no memory or awareness of what had happened in her own home. I felt sick. How many times? How many parties? He consulted his notes. We've documented at least 200 separate events over the past 6 years. That's roughly one every 10 days. The guests varied, but there was a core group of repeat clients. Wealthy people, powerful people, people who could afford the blackmail payments. I did the math in my head. 200 nights of being drugged unconscious. 200 nights of illegal activities happening in her house while she slept. 6 years of her parents choosing money over her safety. Agent Crawford continued. The good news is that Lily was never directly victimized. The Thorntons kept her completely separate from the activities. She's physically safe. Emotionally, we don't know yet. She's been raised by parents who are capable of this level of deception and criminal behavior. That will require extensive therapy to process. I thought about Lily in the next room, coloring pictures of flowers and butterflies, completely unaware that her parents were in federal custody, and her life had permanently changed. Agent Crawford said the Thorntons were facing dozens of federal charges. Blackmail, operating an illegal enterprise, child endangerment for the medication routine, and various other crimes related to the activities that had occurred in their home. They'd likely spend the rest of their lives in prison. Over the next few days, the case exploded across every news outlet. Wealthy lawyers ran blackmail ring from suburban home while sedating daughter was the headline I saw most often. My name wasn't released because I was a witness in an ongoing investigation, but details leaked anyway. News reports mentioned the babysitter who'd refused to drug the child and called the FBI. Some articles made me sound like a hero. Others questioned why I hadn't called the police sooner before the FBI contacted me. The truth was complicated. I'd suspected something was wrong, but I hadn't known what. The cameras had seemed excessive but not criminal. The medication dosage had concerned me, but I wasn't a doctor. I'd been gathering information and trying to figure out what to do when the FBI called. If they hadn't contacted me that night, I would have called CPS the next morning. But the FBI had been faster. Lily's Aunt Rachel arrived from Seattle, and I met her at the FBI office. She was in her 40s, dressed casually, with kind eyes that immediately teared up when she saw Lily. "Oh, sweetie, I've missed you so much." They hugged for a long time. Rachel explained to me that she'd been fighting for custody of Lily for 3 years. She'd suspected something was wrong at the Thorntons' house but couldn't prove it. The courts had sided with the parents every time because Catherine and Michael were successful lawyers with no criminal record and a beautiful home. Rachel was just a school teacher with a modest income. The system had failed Lily by keeping her with the parents who looked perfect on paper. Rachel thanked me repeatedly for protecting Lily. She said she'd been praying for years that someone would see the truth about her brother and sister-in-law. I told her I'd only done what anyone would have done. She shook her head. "You did what 14 other babysitters couldn't do. You questioned things that didn't make sense. You trusted your instincts. You protected a child who wasn't yours. That's not what everyone does. That's special." Over the next few weeks, I gave testimony to federal prosecutors building their case against the Thorntons. They showed me evidence that made me physically ill. Financial records showing the blackmail payments, recordings of the illegal activities, logs documenting when Lily had been medicated. It was all there, meticulously documented by the Thorntons themselves. They'd kept records of everything like it was a legitimate business. The prosecutors explained that many criminals who operate blackmail schemes keep detailed documentation as insurance. If one client tries to go to the police or refuses to pay, the criminals can threaten to release evidence about other clients. It's mutually assured destruction. Everyone is complicit, and everyone has too much to lose by talking. That's why these operations can continue for years without being detected. The trial was scheduled for 8 months later. In the meantime, I tried to return to my normal life. I finished my semester at college, getting extensions on several papers because professors understood the circumstances. I quit babysitting for a while because I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched whenever I was in someone else's home. I started working at the campus library instead. Shelving books where the worst thing that could happen was a paper cut. Amber, my pre-med friend, would check in regularly. She felt partially responsible for the whole thing because she'd been the one to tell me the medication dosage was dangerous. I kept telling her she'd helped save Lily's life. If she hadn't responded to my text that night, I might have given Lily the full dose and never known the truth. She'd studied pharmacology and knew exactly how dangerous that amount of sedative was for a child. Her knowledge had validated my suspicions and given me the courage to act. I started seeing a therapist to process what had happened. Dr. Yolanda Stern specialized in trauma and helped me understand that what I was feeling was normal. Guilt for not noticing sooner, anger at the Thorntons for putting Lily in that situation, fear about what could have happened if things had gone differently. All of it was part of processing a traumatic experience. She helped me recognize that I'd done everything right given the information I had at the time. Rachel would send me updates about Lily every few weeks. She was adjusting well to life in Seattle. She loved Baxter, the golden retriever. She'd made friends at her new school. She was seeing a child psychologist who specialized in trauma. The therapist said Lily showed no signs of abuse beyond the medication routine, which was good news. The sedative hadn't caused permanent damage. Her emotional development seemed normal for her age. The biggest challenge was explaining why her parents were gone. Rachel had told her that Mommy and Daddy had made some bad choices and needed to stay away for a long time. Lily accepted this with the resilience that children sometimes have. She seemed more upset about leaving her bedroom and toys than about losing her parents, which concerned the therapist but also made sense. The Thorntons had never been emotionally present parents. They'd been too focused on their criminal operation. 4 months after the arrests, I received a subpoena to testify at the trial. The prosecutors needed me to explain what happened the night I refused to give Lily the medication. My testimony would establish that the Thorntons were actively endangering their daughter, which would strengthen the child endangerment charges. I flew to the courthouse with Amber, who'd also been subpoenaed to testify about the medication dosage. We sat in the witness waiting room for hours before being called. When I finally entered the courtroom, I saw the Thorntons for the first time since that night. Catherine sat at the defense table in an expensive suit, her face expressionless. Michael sat beside her, whispering to their lawyer. They looked exactly like successful professionals. Nothing about their appearance suggested they were capable of running a criminal enterprise from their suburban home. I took the stand and swore to tell the truth. The prosecutor, a woman named Diane Atwater, walked me through that entire evening. What time I'd arrived, what I'd noticed about the cameras, why I'd been concerned about the medication, what I'd done instead of giving Lily the full dose. I explained everything clearly, trying not to look at the Thorntons. Diane showed me the text messages I'd sent to Amber that night. She had me read them aloud to the jury. Does this seem like too much? For a 6-year-old? The evidence was simple and damning. The defense attorney, a man named Gordon Phillips, tried to suggest I'd misunderstood the situation. That the cameras were standard security, that the medication was properly prescribed by a doctor, that I'd overreacted based on internet research instead of medical expertise. I stayed calm and answered each question honestly. Yes, I'd Googled the medication. Yes, I'd found concerning information. Yes, I'd made a judgment call to protect a child in my care. The jury watched this exchange carefully. Some were taking notes. Others just stared at the Thorntons, whose faces remained blank. Amber's testimony was more technical. She explained lorazepam dosing for pediatric patients. She cited medical guidelines showing that 5 milliliters was 5 times the appropriate dose for Lily's age and weight. She described what would happen if a child received that much sedative regularly. Respiratory depression, cognitive impairment, physical dependence, withdrawal symptoms if the medication was suddenly stopped. The jury looked visibly disturbed by this information. Gordon Phillips tried to argue that Amber wasn't a licensed doctor yet, just a pharmacy technician with pre-med training. Diane countered by bringing in a pediatric pharmacologist who confirmed everything Amber had said. The expert testified that regular sedation at this dosage constituted chemical restraint and met the legal definition of child endangerment. The Thorntons' defense strategy seemed to focus on claiming they'd been advised by a doctor that this dosage was necessary for Lily's severe anxiety. They produced prescription records showing the medication had been legally prescribed, but the prosecution had found the doctor who'd written those prescriptions, and he testified that he'd been lied to. The Thorntons had described a child with severe behavioral issues and sleep disorders that required heavy sedation. When shown videos of Lily from my babysitting nights, the doctor had been horrified. That's not the child they described to me. This child appears completely normal. I would never have prescribed these dosages for this presentation. The trial lasted 3 weeks and included testimony from FBI agents, forensic accountants analyzing the blackmail payments, and several of the previous babysitters who'd worked for the Thorntons. Each babysitter described similar experiences. Cameras everywhere. Uncomfortable feelings about being watched. Concerns about medication or strange requests from the Thorntons. Most had quit without understanding why they felt so uncomfortable. One woman said she'd taken pictures of the cameras before she left because something felt wrong. She'd kept those photos for 2 years, not knowing what to do with them. Now they were evidence in a federal trial. The defense tried to paint the babysitters as a conspiracy of disgruntled employees coordinating false testimony. But we'd never met each other before the trial. We hadn't known about each other's experiences. The pattern had emerged independently, which made it more credible. The jury heard about 14 different women who'd all noticed the same concerning details. That's not a conspiracy. That's a pattern of criminal behavior. The most damaging testimony came from the FBI agents who'd conducted surveillance of the house. They'd placed their own cameras outside the property and recorded everyone who'd attended the parties. They'd identified the guests and interviewed them. Some had cooperated and provided testimony about what happened inside. Others had refused to talk and were facing their own criminal charges. The agents testified about recording equipment they'd found in every room of the house. Professional-grade cameras with remote access capabilities, storage servers containing 8 years of recordings, files organized by date and tagged with client names for easy blackmail reference. One agent described finding Lily's medication log in the Thorntons' office. Every single night for 6 years was documented. Date, time, dosage given. Sometimes there were notes. Full dose, party scheduled, or half dose, quiet night. The log proved this wasn't medical treatment. It was a schedule coordinated with their criminal activities. When Lily needed to be unconscious for parties, she got the full 5 milliliter dose. When no party was scheduled, she sometimes got less or nothing at all. The child's medication wasn't about treating her condition. It was about controlling her awareness based on their criminal schedule. The jury looked sick when this evidence was presented. Several jurors were parents. You could see them imagining their own children being systematically drugged by the people who should protect them most. Gordon Phillips tried to argue that the medication log showed responsible parenting, careful documentation of medical treatment. The prosecutor destroyed this argument by showing the correlation between full doses and party dates. Every single time the Thorntons hosted a party, Lily had received the maximum sedative dose earlier that evening. The pattern was undeniable. Catherine Thornton took the stand in her own defense, which her lawyers had advised against. She testified that everything she'd done was to protect Lily from the stress of her parents' work demands. The parties were legitimate networking events for their law practice. The cameras were security measures. The medication was prescribed by a licensed physician for a real medical condition. She claimed she loved her daughter and had always put Lily's welfare first. Diane Atwater's cross-examination was brutal. She walked Catherine through specific dates from the medication log and matched them to financial records showing blackmail payments received. She showed Catherine her own emails discussing which clients were behind on payments and needed enhanced motivation through threats of exposure. She played recordings of Catherine on the phone with clients, explicitly threatening to release compromising footage if they didn't pay. Every piece of evidence directly contradicted Catherine's testimony about legitimate networking events. The breaking point came when Diane asked Catherine about the night I'd refused to give Lily the medication. Catherine claimed she'd noticed on the cameras that I hadn't followed instructions. She'd sent the threatening text about staying out of unauthorized rooms because she was concerned about property theft, not because she was hiding criminal activity. Diane played the actual text exchange on the courtroom monitors. The timing showed Catherine had sent the text within 30 seconds of me standing outside the locked office door. The photo attachment showed me in real time from a camera I hadn't even noticed. Diane asked how a concerned parent monitoring a babysitter would have cameras sophisticated enough to track someone's location in real time and send immediate photographic proof. Catherine had no good answer. She stammered something about home security systems. The jury didn't buy it. Michael Thornton didn't testify. His lawyers knew he'd be destroyed on cross-examination. The prosecution rested their case after 3 weeks of testimony. The defense called character witnesses who described the Thorntons as dedicated professionals and loving parents. None of these witnesses had been inside the home during evening hours. None had seen the camera systems or medication routines. They testified about the image the Thorntons projected publicly, which made the contrast with their private behavior even more disturbing. The jury deliberated for 2 days before returning guilty verdicts on all counts. Federal blackmail charges, operating a criminal enterprise, child endangerment, multiple counts of witness intimidation for threatening previous babysitters who'd asked questions. The evidence had been overwhelming. Catherine's face remained blank as the verdicts were read. Michael put his head in his hands. Their lawyers immediately filed motions for appeal, but everyone knew those would be rejected. The evidence was too strong, the pattern too clear. Sentencing was scheduled for 6 weeks later. I attended with Rachel and sat in the back of the courtroom. Lily hadn't come. She was in school in Seattle, living a normal life with her aunt and the golden retriever. She didn't need to see her parents sentenced to prison. The judge was a woman named Patricia Ortiz, who'd clearly been affected by the evidence. She described the Thorntons' crimes as a profound betrayal of parental duty and human decency. She noted that they'd used their own daughter's home as the location for their criminal enterprise, exposing her to danger and drugging her to maintain their operation. Catherine received 35 years in federal prison. Michael received 32 years. Both would be in their 70s before they were eligible for parole. The blackmail victims who'd testified received lighter sentences in exchange for cooperation. Those who'd refused to cooperate were facing their own trials. The FBI had dismantled an entire network of illegal activities and corrupt individuals. After the sentencing, Rachel approached me in the courthouse hallway. She was crying. "Thank you. If you'd given Lily that medication that night, she might have been sedated during the arrests. She might have seen things that would traumatize her forever. Instead, she was safe with you in another building. You saved her from so much more than we even realized at the time." I told her I'd just done what felt right. She hugged me and said that's what made it matter. Doing what felt right even when it was scary and uncertain. Even when I didn't have all the information. Even when I was just a college student babysitting for extra money. I'd trusted my instincts and protected a child. That's what heroism actually looks like in real life. Small decisions in crucial moments. Over the next year, I rebuilt my life. I graduated from college with a degree in social work. The experience with Lily had changed my career plans. I'd been pre-law, thinking about becoming a lawyer like the Thorntons appeared to be. Now I wanted to work directly with children and families. I wanted to be someone who noticed when things were wrong and did something about it. Rachel invited me to visit Lily in Seattle. I flew out for a weekend and stayed at their house. Lily was 7 now and thriving. She remembered me as Sophia who saved me, even though she didn't fully understand what she'd been saved from. We played with Baxter in the backyard, made cookies in the kitchen, watched movies on the couch. Normal kid stuff, happy stuff. At one point, Lily asked about her parents. Rachel had told her that Mommy and Daddy had done bad things and were in timeout for a very long time. Lily seemed to accept this explanation. She said she missed them sometimes, but she was happy living with Aunt Rachel. She liked her new school. She liked having a dog. She liked not feeling sleepy all the time. That last comment made my chest tight. She'd noticed. Even at 6 years old, she'd been aware on some level that the medication made her feel wrong. But she'd trusted her parents and accepted it as normal. Now that she wasn't being drugged every night, she felt better. More alert, more energetic, more alive. The child psychiatrist said Lily would need ongoing therapy, especially as she got older and began to understand more about what had happened. But for now, she was healing. Children are resilient in ways adults sometimes forget. Rachel walked me to my rental car when it was time to leave. She'd been approved as Lily's permanent guardian. The Thorntons had tried to contest it from prison but had no legal standing given their criminal convictions. Lily would grow up in Seattle with an aunt who loved her and a dog who adored her. She'd have a normal childhood, the kind every child deserves but not every child gets. 3 years after the trial, I was working at a child advocacy center when I got a call from Agent Crawford. He'd retired from the FBI, but wanted to update me on something. The Thorntons case had led to 17 other investigations across the country. The FBI had discovered that blackmail operations like theirs were more common than anyone realized. Wealthy people hosting illegal activities and recording everything for leverage. The cameras and technology made it easier than ever to run these schemes. But awareness was growing too. Law enforcement was learning how to identify and investigate these operations. My testimony had been cited in training materials for FBI agents learning to handle similar cases. The small decisions I'd made that night, questioning the medication dosage, pouring it out and giving water instead, keeping Lily safe, those decisions had rippled outward in ways I never imagined. Other babysitters, nannies, and caregivers who found themselves in suspicious situations now had a template for what to do. Document everything. Trust your instincts. Protect the child first. Ask questions later. Agent Crawford said the FBI had received dozens of tips from childcare workers across the country who'd noticed concerning patterns in homes where they worked. Not all had led to criminal investigations. Some were overprotective parents with excessive security measures but no illegal activities. But several had uncovered serious crimes. Children being abused, elderly people being exploited, criminal enterprises operating out of suburban homes while caregivers were pressured to ignore red flags. Each investigation started because someone noticed something wrong and reported it. I asked about the Thorntons. Were they adjusting to prison? Agent Crawford said Catherine had been attacked by other inmates who'd learned why she was there. Prisoners have their own moral code, and crimes against children are at the bottom of that hierarchy. She'd been moved to protective custody for her own safety. Michael had become a prison paralegal, helping other inmates with legal research. Neither had shown remorse. Both maintained they'd done nothing wrong except get caught. Their appeals had all been denied. They'd spend the rest of their lives in federal prison and probably die there. I felt nothing hearing this news. No satisfaction. No pity. Just a profound sadness that two people who should have been protecting their daughter had instead built their lives around exploiting her vulnerability. Lily was 10 now and thriving in Seattle. Rachel sent me photos occasionally. Lily with Baxter at the beach. Lily at her school play. Lily smiling while holding a trophy from her soccer team. Normal kid stuff. The life she should have always had. I kept those photos on my desk at work as a reminder of why I did this job. Why I worked with traumatized children and their families. Why I advocated for kids who couldn't advocate for themselves. Because sometimes one person noticing something wrong can change everything. The Child Advocacy Center where I worked saw hundreds of cases every year. Some were referred by teachers who noticed bruises. Others by doctors who saw injuries that didn't match the explanation. Some by neighbors who heard concerning sounds through walls. And yes, some by babysitters and nannies who'd been in homes where something felt wrong. We trained all of them on what to look for and how to report it. My story became part of that training. Not to make me sound heroic, but to show that ordinary people in ordinary situations could make extraordinary differences. That you didn't need special skills or authority. You just needed to pay attention and trust yourself when something seemed wrong. 5 years after that night at the Thorntons' house, I was promoted to director of the Child Advocacy Center. My first act was creating a program specifically for caregivers, babysitters, nannies, home health aides, anyone who worked in private homes with vulnerable people. We taught them what normal looked like versus what concerning looked like. We gave them resources for reporting suspicions. We promised confidentiality and legal protection for those who came forward. The program served over 500 caregivers in its first year. We received 23 reports of potentially concerning situations. 18 were investigated and cleared as overprotective parents or misunderstood circumstances. 5 led to criminal investigations. 3 children were removed from abusive homes. 1 elderly woman was protected from financial exploitation by her caregiver. 1 disabled adult was rescued from a neglectful situation. 5 investigations. 4 people saved. Because caregivers had been trained to notice red flags and given tools to report them safely. I still think about that night sometimes. Reading bedtime stories to Lily while cameras tracked every movement. Finding the medication and knowing something was deeply wrong. Making the choice to pour it down the sink and give her water instead. Carrying her out of that house while federal agents positioned themselves for arrests. Every decision had mattered. Every choice had consequences. If I'd ignored my instincts and given Lily the full dose, she would have been unconscious during the FBI raid. She might have been traumatized by waking up in a house full of strangers and chaos. She might have been taken into emergency foster care instead of staying with me in that safe room. The cascade of suffering that could have happened if I'd just followed instructions without questioning them. But I didn't follow instructions. I questioned. I researched. I trusted that feeling in my gut that told me something was wrong. And because of that, Lily slept safely through the worst night of her life. She woke up in my arms being carried to safety, instead of waking up alone in a house being raided by federal agents. That choice, that one decision to question a medication dosage, had changed the trajectory of her entire life. People sometimes ask me if I ever babysit anymore. I tell them no. Not because I'm afraid, but because I found my real calling. I work with children and families in crisis now. I advocate for kids who need someone to fight for them. I train other adults to recognize signs of abuse and exploitation. I've helped change laws about mandatory reporting and caregiver protections. The work is hard, but it matters. Last month, I received a letter from Lily. She's 13 now and knows more about what happened when she was 6. Her therapist thought she was ready to understand the truth. Rachel had sat down with her and explained everything carefully. How her parents had been criminals, how they'd drugged her every night, how a babysitter had protected her, how the FBI had saved her. Lily's letter thanked me for refusing to follow her parents' instructions. She wrote that she'd been talking with her therapist about trust and safety and understanding that some adults hurt children even when they're supposed to protect them. She said knowing I'd chosen to protect her instead of obeying her parents had helped her learn to trust adults again. That my actions had shown her that good people exist who will do the right thing even when it's hard. She included a drawing of us reading together in her bedroom. In the picture, there were stars on the ceiling instead of cameras. It was how she wanted to remember that night. Not the surveillance or the danger, but the simple act of someone reading her a story and making her feel safe. I framed that drawing and hung it in my office. On difficult days when the work feels overwhelming, I look at it and remember why this matters. Why noticing matters. Why questioning matters. Why protecting children matters even when you're scared and uncertain. Appreciate you watching this far. If you enjoyed it, drop a like, leave a comment, and subscribe so you won't miss the next story.